used to think peace sounded like silence, the kind that wraps around you like a soft blanket at the end of a long day. Now I know that silence can be a warning, a predator holding its breath before it strikes. The night everything shattered, our house was too quiet in a way that made my skin crawl. Nikolai's footsteps were missing. No pacing across the hardwood floors like usual. No hushed phone calls behind closed doors. No muffled arguments whispered into the darkness when he thought I was asleep. Just nothing. An absence so complete it felt like the house itself was holding its breath. Then the doorbell cut through that unnatural calm like a gunshot echoing in an empty canyon. 2 a.m. No sane person visits at 2 a.m. But when I opened the door, still half asleep and confused, I found Mason Pierce standing there, my husband's best friend since college, his business partner, the man who'd been his best man at our wedding. His breath came sharp and quick like he'd been running. His face was pale, almost gray in the porch light. He didn't greet me with his usual warm smile. Didn't make small talk or apologize for the hour. He just looked at me with eyes full of something that looked like fear and said 5 words that changed everything. You need to leave. Now. Not tomorrow morning. Not after we talked. Not after I packed properly or left a note or figured out what was happening. Now. Immediately. This second. My brain completely stalled, trying to process what he was saying, but my body reacted instinctively. Fear recognizes truth faster than logic ever can. Nikolai? I whispered, my voice cracking. Mason shook his head once. Slowly. Heavily. Like the weight of that single gesture might crush him. He crossed a line he can't uncross, Vivienne. The way he said my name, so careful, so gentle, made my stomach drop like I was falling from a great height. I didn't know yet what Mason meant, didn't understand the full horror of what was coming, but the tremor in his usually steady voice told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't about a marriage problem. This wasn't about another woman or a stupid argument or the distance that had been growing between Nikolai and me for months. This was about survival. My survival. I grabbed my coat from the hook by the door without asking another question. That's the night I learned that love can be a warning too, that sometimes the people who care about you have to hurt you to save you. Mason's car smelled like winter air and secrets I wasn't ready to hear. He drove without music, his eyes locked on the road ahead like he could outrun consequences if he just drove fast enough. My pulse beat in my throat, metallic and desperate, and my hands shook in my lap. My marriage had cracks, yes. I wasn't stupid or blind. There had been stress, distance, late nights at the office that stretched into early mornings. Mood swings. Irritability. Locked doors and whispered conversations that stopped abruptly when I entered a room. But fleeing at 2 a.m. like criminals? That seemed impossible, excessive, insane. My heart tried desperately to rationalize everything until Mason broke the heavy silence. This isn't about a woman or an argument. His voice snapped like cold wire pulled too tight. Nikolai is in deep. Dangerous deep. The city lights blurred past my window, familiar streets suddenly feeling foreign and threatening. I thought of the man who used to hold my waist while we cooked dinner together. The man who had memorized exactly how I liked my coffee. The man who once looked at me like I was a miracle he didn't deserve. That man wouldn't hurt me. Would he? Tell me everything, I whispered, barely able to form the words. Mason exhaled like speaking physically hurt him. He used client investment funds to pay off gambling debts. Millions of dollars, Vivienne. Multiple accounts. Over months. The oxygen seemed to leave the car completely. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Some very dangerous people are coming for him, Mason continued, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. He swallowed hard. And you're the leverage they'll use to make him pay. Leverage. The word sat in my chest like a stone, cold and heavy. I thought of business jargon I'd heard Nikolai use, stocks, trades, assets, negotiation tactics. I never imagined it could mean wives. Mean lives. Mean me. Nikolai would never. I began, but Mason didn't let me finish. He already did. His voice was flat, final. He told me that people whisper about pressure and high finance, about temptation and greed, but no one tells you how terrifyingly fast addiction mutates into desperation. How a controlled man becomes a desperate one. Nikolai had started with controlled bets, Mason explained. Small amounts. Just for the thrill. Then came losses. Then borrowing to cover those losses. Then stealing from accounts he managed. He thought he could win it back before anyone noticed, Mason said bitterly. They all do. My stomach folded in on itself. Our anniversary dinner 3 weeks ago suddenly flashed in my mind with new, horrible clarity. His hand had been shaking as he picked up his wine glass. The unexplained irritability when I'd asked simple questions. The way he'd been disappearing at 3 a.m., claiming he couldn't sleep and needed to drive around. The locked office drawers I'd noticed but never questioned. The way he'd flinched when his phone rang at dinner. All those signs I'd mislabeled as work stress. It wasn't stress. It was addiction wearing a designer suit and a charming smile. My husband hadn't changed overnight. He'd been unraveling quietly, thread by thread, and now those threads were wrapped around my throat like a noose. How long have you known? I asked Mason, my voice hollow. He hesitated. 3 weeks. He begged me not to tell you. Said he was handling it. But he wasn't. No. He was making it worse. We parked outside a 24-hour diner on the edge of town, the kind of place where nobody asks questions because they don't want answers. The fluorescent lights inside buzzed like dying insects. Mason ordered coffee, black as the truth we were drowning in. I couldn't drink. Could barely breathe. Then why warn me? I asked, wrapping my cold hands around the untouched mug for warmth. Why betray him? Mason looked exhausted, like he'd aged 10 years in a single night. Because he's gone too far. And you're still good. That sentence absolutely gutted me. Mason explained that the debt collectors weren't the type who send polite emails or lawyers with briefcases. They were the kind who show up in the middle of the night. The kind who erase problems instead of negotiating solutions. The kind who make people disappear when debts go unpaid. Nikolai is buying time by offering them you, Mason said quietly. My blood went cold. Not literally, he added quickly, seeing my face. But if you disappear, it gives him leverage to stall, to control the narrative, to negotiate a deal. Maybe manipulate some sympathy. My marriage had turned into a chessboard and I was a piece being sacrificed to save the king. The tears came then, not loud or dramatic, just endless and quiet. Betrayal doesn't scream. It leaks out slowly like smoke filling a sealed room until you can't breathe anymore. Did he ever really love me? I asked the stupid question that only love asks, the question I shouldn't need answered. Mason didn't flinch. I think he still does. That's what makes this so tragic. The knife twisted deeper into my chest. Nikolai wasn't evil incarnate. He was a man unraveling in real time. A man who loved me and still chose a path that endangered everything we'd built together. Both truths could coexist, and that's what made it absolutely unbearable. I pictured him clearly, that calm luxury he wore like armor, the tailored suits, the old money voice, the type of man who looked like a legacy and hid like bankruptcy. He was an investment banker by profession, a gambler by compulsion, and a liar by desperate necessity. What do I do now? I asked, feeling lost in a way I'd never experienced before. Mason slid a cheap burner phone across the sticky diner table. You disappear before they realize you're gone. No banks. No credit cards. No patterns. No hospitals. No old friends. Not even me for a while. The silence that followed his instructions felt like erasing myself from existence completely. My entire life was about to become a ghost story. How long? I whispered. Until it's safe. Until he either pays or... Mason didn't finish. Didn't need to. I borrowed clothes from a 24-hour pharmacy like a woman laundering her own identity. Black hoodie. Baseball cap. Sunglasses at night, absurd and conspicuous, but anonymity isn't aesthetic. It's survival. It's whatever works. The city felt completely different when you're hiding in it instead of living in it. Familiar streets became dark tunnels. Store windows became witnesses. Every face could be a threat. Mason dropped me at a motel that smelled like last chances and desperate people, the kind of place where the clerk doesn't look up when you pay cash. "I'll check on you when it's safe," Mason promised, his hand on my shoulder. I asked the harder question, "Are you choosing me over him?" His jaw tightened visibly. "No. I'm choosing right over wrong. There's a difference." The door shut behind him. I was alone. Truly, completely alone. That's when the first massive wave of panic hit, violent, non-negotiable, drowning. I locked the door. Checked it. Checked it again. Then I checked it a third time because my brain wouldn't believe it was secure. Then I sat on the floor because bed suddenly felt too exposed, too vulnerable. Fear was no longer just an emotion I could control or push down. It was a permanent roommate who wouldn't pay rent, who took up space in every corner of my mind. Day one of disappearing taught me that fear sharpens instincts you didn't know you had. Every sound outside the door matters. Every footstep in the hallway becomes vocabulary your body learns to read. My phone buzzed at exactly 8:12 a.m., jolting me from restless half-sleep. Unknown number. My thumb hovered over the screen, frozen. Curiosity is what gets people killed in movies. I answered anyway. It was Nikolai. His voice was calm. Collected. Poison poured into a crystal glass. "Vivienne? Where are you?" My voice betrayed absolutely nothing. "At home." "Why?" A beat of silence lasted too long. "Something feels wrong. I just need to know you're safe." His tenderness almost fooled me again. Almost. "I'm fine." "When Mason stops by later, let him in," Nikolai said casually. "I asked him to check on you." My spine turned to ice. "Why Mason?" "Because I trust him with you." The irony was Shakespearean and cruel. I understood then. He didn't know that I already knew everything. He thought Mason was still loyal to him. I hung up slowly, carefully, like placing a bookmark inside a chapter that wasn't finished destroying me yet. First rule of disappearing completely: destroy your digital footprints. I wiped social media logins, deleted cloud backups, disabled every location service, and factory reset my phone. The version of me that Nikolai knew was being erased pixel by pixel, byte by byte. Grief feels like loss of something precious. Betrayal feels like demolition of everything you thought was real. In the bathroom mirror, I hardly recognized the woman staring back at me. She looked like someone who'd walked through an ordinary door and found a war on the other side. I whispered to her anyway, a promise to myself: "You will not die in the story he wrote for you." Survival isn't dramatic or heroic. It's calculations and timing and swallowing your own heartbeat so it doesn't give away your location. The world didn't stop because mine did. Cars honked outside my motel window. People went to work. Life continued completely clueless to my personal apocalypse. That contrast, the continuation of normal while your own world detonates, is the loneliest sound on earth. Mason returned exactly 48 hours later, using a different car, different coat, moving with different caution. This wasn't a friendly check-in. This was strategy. "They're watching your house," he said without preamble. My stomach dropped. 2 men. Not subtle. Definitely not amateurs. The debt collectors. "Do they know about me?" I asked. He shook his head. "Not yet." Relief lasted exactly 2 seconds before he added, "Nikolai filed a missing person alert." My hand shot to my mouth. To protect you, Mason said quickly. A bitter laugh rose in my throat. Or to track me? Mason exhaled slowly. Both can be true. The emotional double edge made me physically dizzy. Nikolai wasn't a cartoon villain twirling a mustache and laughing at my pain. He was a man drowning in his own mistakes, pulling me underwater because he couldn't breathe himself. That complexity hurt more than simple hatred ever could. Mason slid an envelope across the motel table. No explanation. Inside, cash. More than simple kindness, less than guilt. Nikolai can't see these withdrawals, he explained. It's clean money. Invisible. I wanted to refuse on principle, but pride gets you killed in situations like this. I took it. What's your stake in all this? I asked. He rubbed his jaw, looking older and more tired than I'd ever seen him. I owed him loyalty as a friend. I don't owe him your life. Financial collapse is loud, bankruptcy filings, repo men, public shame. But moral collapse? That's silent until it roars. Nikolai's had been completely silent until it exploded. I asked the question that had been clawing at my inside since 2 a.m. Do you think he would actually ask them to hurt me directly? Mason met my eyes without blinking, without softening the truth. Not intentionally. But desperation doesn't ask permission before it destroys things. That sentence should have freed me from guilt. Instead, it buried hope alive. The media found the story before law enforcement did. Investment banker under internal review. Anonymous source. Unverified claims. But that was enough. Markets don't wait for proof to panic. They react to smoke, assuming fire. I read the article on a burner phone I'd bought with cash at a gas station. The world was inching toward truth without knowing the worst of it yet. Mason called that night. Someone leaked Nikolai's situation to the press. Who? I asked. Was it Nikolai trying to control the narrative? No, Mason said firmly. You don't leak a fire at your own house. My head spun. If not Nikolai, then who? Betrayal was no longer a simple triangle. It was becoming a complicated map with lines going everywhere. I changed cities overnight. New name, Sarah Mitchell. No social media. No online presence. New job serving coffee at a small cafe where nobody knew me, where humility became temporary camouflage. There's a strange intimacy in anonymity. Customers vent to you because you aren't really a person to them, just a friendly vessel for their complaints. One day a businessman complained loudly about losing $50,000 in a bad investment. I smiled politely while mourning millions in silence. Pain operates on surreal mathematics. 2 weeks later, Mason appeared again. Different city this time. Same storm clouds in his eyes. I was followed yesterday, he said. We walked instead of sitting. Movement is harder to target, harder to corner. Your name came up in a wire transfer, he whispered urgently. My blood froze. Not related to the gambling debt. Something else entirely. Someone is moving money using accounts linked to your old address. Someone was framing footprints for a woman who didn't exist anymore. And whatever trap they were building, it was tightening around me. The next devastating twist arrived disguised as mundane mail. A forwarded letter from my old home address, divorce paperwork that Nikolai had filed before the gambling spiraled completely out of control. The dates punched holes in the entire narrative I'd been desperately clinging to. Before the debt. Before the danger. Before the sleepless nights and shaking hands. Before all the excuses I'd made for him. He'd planned an exit from our marriage long before his collapse gave him a convenient excuse. My disappearance wasn't just leverage. It was convenient. Maybe even planned. I confronted Mason at our next careful meeting. He didn't try to defend Nikolai this time. I didn't want to be the messenger for every death of your illusions, he said sadly. I stopped grieving my marriage and started analyzing it like a case study. Patterns sharpened into focus. Affection timed like strategic moves. Arguments carefully delayed like business negotiations. Apologies weaponized into trust rebuilding cycles. Love wasn't the hook that caught me. Trust was the bait I'd swallowed whole. The debt collectors found Mason before they found me. One fractured rib, one warning delivered with fists. We know a wife exists. We'll collect interest in flesh if the money doesn't appear. He told me this without drama, like reading tomorrow's weather forecast. That calm chilled me more than his injury. My life was no longer metaphorical leverage. It was literal collateral for my husband's debts. I realized then that hiding was purely defensive. Surviving required offense. Action. I contacted the one person Nikolai feared more than debt collectors or financial regulators, his old mentor from business school, Helena Dre. Her reputation was immaculate. Her influence was surgical and precise. If Helena whispered ruin, markets listened. If she questioned someone's integrity, doors bolted shut. If she intervened in a situation, the world itself shifted weight. Helena agreed to meet in person. 1 hour. No electronics. No recordings. When I finished telling her everything, the gambling, the theft, the threats, my disappearance, she didn't gasp or express shock. Titans don't gasp. They calculate. You're not asking for rescue, Helena observed. You're asking for leverage. I nodded. She smiled slightly for the first time. Good. Victims don't move markets. Players do. The truth had a clear shape now, evidence compiled carefully, timelines aligned precisely, transactions traced through offshore accounts. Not just gambling debts anymore. Deliberate money laundering. Intentional setup of a missing wife scandal to buy time and sympathy. Nikolai wasn't drowning anymore. He was negotiating with the storm itself, using me as a bargaining chip. Helena released her statement first, subtle but absolutely lethal in financial circles. Preliminary concerns regarding fiduciary conduct at Sloane Investments. No direct accusations. No jumping to conclusions. Just a raised eyebrow from a woman that markets feared disappointing. Stocks flinched overnight. Then I surfaced publicly myself. Not with hysteria or tears. With control. A clean statement. Steady voice. No weaponized emotions. No theatrical performance. Just facts laid out clearly. Dates. Documents. Bank statements. Calm as the loudest accusation possible. The world recoiled not at the crime itself, but at the composed strength of the woman they'd assumed was too broken to fight back. Nikolai didn't deny the accusations initially. He tried narrative redirection instead, a PR strategy one recognized. A fractured marriage. A mentally fragile woman. A misunderstanding magnified by panic and grief. It was a masterpiece of subtle condescension designed to make me seem unstable. The public almost bought it, until the wire transfer records dropped like iron gates crashing down. Sympathy shifted on impact. The debt collectors vanished once Helena expertly rerouted the real target back onto Nikolai's ledger where it belonged. Danger evaporated when the illusion of leverage dissolved completely. Threats only survive while fear cooperates. The divorce finalized without dramatic fanfare. No screaming courtroom battles. No explosive endings. I watched Nikolai sign the papers like a man signing a mirror he no longer recognized. No begging. No villain monologues. Just quiet grief of a man realizing too late that betrayal bankrupts the betrayer too. I didn't get revenge in any satisfying way. I got truth. Revenge screams and fades. Truth echoes longer. Do I still love the man he used to be? Some days, yes. Do I mourn everything we lost? Always. But grief is heavier when it's mixed with relief. I didn't survive because I was untouchable or special. I survived because I stopped being movable. Mason stayed in touch afterward. Not as frequently, but enough. You did the right thing, he told me once over coffee. The hardest right thing I've ever seen someone do. You did it first, I reminded him. At 2 a.m. when you rang my doorbell. He smiled sadly. We both did what needed doing. I learned that Nikolai lost everything, his career, his reputation, his freedom for a while. He served 18 months for fraud. I felt nothing when I heard. Not satisfaction. Not pity. Just emptiness where emotions used to live. Helena offered me a job at her firm. You're sharper than most people I've hired with fancy degrees, she said. I accepted. Started rebuilding my life piece by careful piece. I changed my name legally. Started therapy. Learned to sleep without jumping at every sound. Slowly, carefully, I became someone new. Someone stronger. Sometimes I still wake up at 2 a.m., heart racing, expecting danger. Old trauma doesn't disappear. It just becomes furniture you learn to walk around. I met someone new eventually. A kind man named David who worked in education, about as far from finance as possible. He knew my story. I'd learned not to hide truth anymore. You're brave, he said once. I shook my head. I'm just stubborn about staying alive. We took things slowly. I was careful with trust now, weighing every word and action. David understood. He never pushed. Never demanded more than I could give. Mason attended our wedding 2 years later. He gave a toast to Vivienne, who taught me that real friendship sometimes means betraying loyalty to protect what's right. I saw Nikolai once after everything. Accidental encounter at a coffee shop. He looked older, smaller somehow. He started to approach, then stopped. Just nodded from across the room. I nodded back. No words needed. We'd said everything that mattered already. I built a new life brick by brick. New friends who knew nothing of my past. New routines. New city. New everything. Sometimes people ask if I'm angry about what happened. I'm not. I'm grateful. Grateful for Mason's 2 a.m. warning. Grateful I listened. Grateful I fought back. I started a support group for people escaping financial abuse. It's more common than people think, partners gambling away life savings, taking out secret loans, destroying families. Every week, I watch someone else find the courage to leave. To survive. To rebuild. Their victories feel like my own. David and I are talking about children. The idea terrifies me, bringing life into a world that hurt me so badly. But maybe that's the point. Maybe hope is choosing life anyway. I keep the burner phone Mason gave me. Not because I need it. Because it reminds me that I'm capable of survival. That I can walk away from anything if I have to. Helena became a mentor and friend. She taught me how power works, how markets move, how to protect yourself financially. Knowledge is armor. I'll never be naive again. That innocence died at 2 a.m. when my doorbell rang. But I gained something better than innocence. I gained wisdom. Mason tells me sometimes that he almost didn't warn me. Almost convinced himself it wasn't his place to interfere. I'm glad you did, I always say. Me too. Nikolai tried to reach out once, years later. A letter delivered through lawyers. I didn't open it. Some chapters close and stay closed. I learned that forgiveness isn't required for moving forward. You can acknowledge pain without reconciliation. You can survive without closure. The scars remain. I'm cautious with money now. I check locks obsessively. I startle easily at unexpected doorbells. But I'm alive. That's not nothing. David proposed on a quiet evening. No grand gesture. Just honesty. I love you exactly as you are, scars and all. I said yes. We're building something real. Something honest. Something that won't collapse when tested. That's all I want now, solid ground. I think about the woman I was before all this. She seems like someone I knew in childhood. Distant. Almost unrecognizable. She was softer. More trusting. Less vigilant. I don't miss her exactly. But I mourn what she didn't know was coming. This story doesn't have a neat bow ending. Life rarely does. But it has truth, and that's more valuable. If this teaches anything, let it be this simple lesson. The danger isn't when someone hates you openly. The danger is when they need something from you more than they need you alive. Trust actions over words. Watch patterns over promises. Protect yourself first. Love doesn't require self-destruction. I share my story now not for pity but for warning. So someone else might recognize the signs earlier. Might leave sooner. Might survive. Mason and I grab coffee monthly. We don't talk about Nikolai much. That chapter closed. We focus on now. He married recently. A wonderful woman who knows everything and loves him anyway. You saved my life, I told him at their wedding. You saved your own life, he corrected. I just rang the doorbell. Maybe we're both right. Maybe survival requires both warning and action. The person who alerts you and the person who runs. I sleep better now. Most nights. The nightmares faded but never fully disappeared. Trauma leaves permanent marks. But those marks tell a story worth telling. Not a story of victimhood. A story of strength discovered in crisis. Of choosing survival over sentiment. I reconnected with old friends eventually. Explained my disappearance in vague terms. Most understood. Real friends don't demand explanations. My relationship with money changed completely. I'm cautious. Careful. Every account in my name only. Every decision mine alone. David understands. He suggested a prenup without me asking. Protect yourself, he said. Always. That's how I knew he was different. We bought a house together. Small. Modest. But ours. Every locked door means safety now instead of secrets. I pass that old motel sometimes. The one where I hid. It looks different now. Less frightening. Just a building. I'm not defined by what happened. But I'm shaped by it. There's a difference. What happens to you is data. What you do with it is character. I chose to survive. Then I chose to thrive. Both were conscious decisions requiring daily effort. Some days are harder than others. Anniversaries. Triggers. Unexpected reminders. I've learned to be gentle with myself on hard days. Therapy taught me that healing isn't linear. You don't climb steadily upward. You spiral. Sometimes higher, sometimes lower, but generally progressing. I'm somewhere on that spiral now. Higher than before. Not at the peak yet. Maybe there is no peak. Maybe it's just continuous climbing. The support group I started now has 3 locations. We've helped dozens of people. Each one feels like honoring my own survival. People ask how I forgave Mason for knowing and not telling me immediately. I explain that I haven't. Forgiveness is optional. Gratitude isn't. He made an impossible choice in impossible circumstances. He chose right eventually. That's enough for me. I wrote a book about my experience. Changed names. Published under a pseudonym. It's selling well. Reviews say it's gripping and suspenseful. They don't know it's real. That every word happened. Sometimes truth masquerades as fiction because fiction feels safer. David read it before publication. Held me while I cried. You're so strong, he whispered. I'm so tired, I replied. Both true. Strength isn't the absence of exhaustion. It's continuing despite it. I saw Helena last week. She's retired now but still sharp as ever. You've done well, she said approvingly. You learned the most important lesson, how to save yourself. I thanked her for everything. I just opened the door, she said. You walked through it. Everyone wants credit for my survival. Mason. Helena. My therapist. But the truth? I saved myself. I chose to run when warned. I chose to fight when cornered. I chose to rebuild when everything collapsed. Those choices matter. They define me more than what was done to me. I'm not a victim. I'm a survivor. There's a difference. Victims are defined by what happened. Survivors are defined by what they did next. I did what was necessary. Left when told. Hid when hunted. Fought when ready. Rebuilt when safe. That's the story. Nikolai exists somewhere. Living some life I don't care about. He's not my story anymore. He's not even a chapter. Just a footnote explaining context. This isn't a revenge story. It's a survival story. Those aren't the same. Revenge requires maintaining connection to your oppressor. Survival requires severing it completely. I survived. Then I thrived. That's the revenge that matters, living well. If you're reading this and recognizing yourself in any part, listen carefully. When someone who cares about you rings your doorbell at 2 a.m. and says, "You need to leave now," you leave. You don't ask for explanations. You don't demand details. You don't wait for perfect information. You trust the person who risked everything to warn you. You grab your coat. You walk out that door. You survive first. Understand later. I'm alive because I listened. Because Mason found courage I didn't know he had. Because I found strength I didn't know I possessed. The danger isn't always obvious. Sometimes it wears a wedding ring and remembers your coffee order. Sometimes it whispers, "I love you," while planning your destruction. Trust isn't given freely anymore in my life. It's earned slowly through consistent action. Words are wind. Behavior is the truth. I'm happy now. Genuinely happy. Not the naive happiness of before, but the hard-won happiness of after. The kind that knows darkness and chooses light anyway. My doorbell rings sometimes. I still jump. Still check the peephole carefully. Still remember that night. But now I know, I'm the kind of person who survives. Who runs when necessary. Who fights when cornered. Who rebuilds when everything burns. That knowledge is armor. That knowledge is power. That knowledge saved my life. At 2 a.m., my doorbell rang. It was my husband's best friend. He said, "You need to leave now." I listened. I left. I survived. That's the whole story. And it's enough.